Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Deep into Education. And on today's episode, I have Akil Parker, a father. He is a math tutor and a math expert, which I like to call him, and you'll find out a little why later, as well as the founder and CEO of allthismath. I connected with Akil on Facebook and Instagram, just looking at his content and him sharing some posts about how he teaches his daughter math, which I found very intriguing since his children are similar ages to mine. And I'm just really excited to have Mr. Parker here with us today just to share a little bit about himself and his educational journey, as well as, what led him into the math world, and just to share some resources that he has for us all. So thank you again, Akil. Nice to meet you. And thank you so much for joining me. And so feel free to introduce yourself and we'll get going on our conversations today.
Sure, and thank you for having me. And I just want to say that I like the title of your podcast, Deep into Education. I think
Thank you.
it's very fitting.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, so my name is Akil Parker. I'm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was raised in Baltimore, Maryland. I have been a math teacher since 2005, and I've been an adjunct professor of math since 2009, well, really 2018, teaching math methods courses initially at LaSalle University here in Philadelphia, and then at Cheney University, the first HBCU founded in 1837. But people from Lincoln University have the distinction of saying that they're the first degree granting historically Black college. So there's a lot of, you know, uh, friendly gang warring between them. But anyway, it's all in good fun. But I've been able to, learn a conceptual understanding of mathematics from having to teach math methods courses. And it's something that it helped me to realize that I had some blind spots when I was a student coming up in my K through 12 experience. I was one of those students that was really good at math, but I was good, in terms of algorithms and procedure. I understood procedures, but I didn't really understand why. I didn't understand why long division worked. I didn't understand why the multiplication algorithm worked, or what's really happening when you're, carrying the one. I didn't really understand that actually you're not carrying a one, you're carrying actually a 10, or, really how to break it down. I was able to learn all of that from having to teach math methods courses to education majors at LaSalle University, at Cheney University, and then also creating the video content on my YouTube channel in order to explain it better to young people and also their parents or
Nice.
grandparents, uncles, aunts, whoever, who may want to be able to feel equipped to provide homework help. So I'm really thankful for a lot of the experiences that I've had in terms of teaching, because through that, whether it's through the teaching math methods and also the tutoring, so many students with so many different learning styles, I've been able to develop a love for math. A lot of people assume that, I loved math when I was young. I didn't really love math when I was young. I didn't hate it, but, it was kind of like, it was a necessary evil, type of class. It
Yeah.
was like, I just like being good and I like getting good grades. I like the attention I would get in my community and from my friends and from my family, and all the positive reinforcement. I just like getting good grades. So if I needed to get good grades and math was one of my classes, I would try to do well in math. So, but I didn't really develop a love for it until many years later, like after I was well into my teaching career.
Okay.
And I started all this math in 2017. Went full time with it in 2018 after I left the school district of Philadelphia, and you know, um, just kind of never looked back. Started with the math tutoring that led to some educational consulting work, of which I plan to do a lot more of that going forward. Started the YouTube channel during the pandemic in 2020, in the spring of 2020, as a resource for youth and also for parents and, caregivers. And, we've just been working, trying to build the company and have all this math become a movement, and also provide other resources. I published my first book in 2023 called How to
Nice.
Use All This Math Volume 1. I was intentional about calling it Volume 1 because there will definitely be a Volume 2 and a Volume 3 and possibly a Volume 4.
Nice.
And it's a guidebook for parents and other elders, where I'm showing how to take everyday activities and convert them into teachable moments to
Yes.
show their children, to develop the skills with that develop skills in algebra, geometry, and even just basic arithmetic. That's what the book does. So, I'm trying to meet people where they are, and really show
Mhm.
people the practical nature of mathematics and how math is
Absolutely.
all around us.
That's great. And that book is needed. I'm like, I need a copy. um, but yes, thank you so much for introducing yourself. And sorry if I cut you off a little bit there. But definitely, you again, as per usual, I love when everybody has so much like rich background into the content area that they're very familiar with. And, I like how, again, you're stating, it wasn't your favorite thing, but it is something that is
Mhm.
needed, especially from the educational world. And I really love talking about the positive reinforcements and things like that. And I want to come back to that in a few minutes. But let me backtrack a little bit just to clarify. Did you only teach collegiate courses, or did you teach at the high school level or any other K-12 education?
So the bulk of my career was spent in the high school level. So in
Okay.
2005, I started teaching on the high school level as a long-term substitute. In
Okay.
the
Awesome.
spring of 2005, in the fourth quarter, I took over for a teacher that went on leave. It was a 10th grade he was a 10th grade geometry teacher. I taught like four sections of geometry. And it
Mhm.
was a little like it was weird because, if you've ever done long-term subbing, it's like you're still a sub, so you're not really the
Yeah.
teacher, but then at the same time you come back every day for like
Yeah.
3 months, so you kind
Yep.
of are the teacher. So
Yeah.
there's that balance,
Yeah.
how much respect the students are actually going to afford you, versus like how much authority you actually have, because it's
Mhm.
kind of you gotta you learn that balance. So that's how
Absolutely.
I started, and then I got my first full-time position later that fall, in the fall of 2005, and at a school in South Philadelphia, actually not too far from where the original Cheney University was located when it was the Institute for Colored Youth,
Mhm.
founded in 1837 in South Philadelphia. So I taught like I had a couple of sections of algebra 2, I had like two sections of elementary functions,
Mhm.
and that was my real introduction to like actual classroom teaching. And I've
Yeah.
just, learned a lot, from there. So I taught, in traditional, charter schools and also traditional public schools up until 2018 in Philadelphia. And currently, I still, I've also bounced around a little bit, and I still teach on an online high school,
Okay.
an institution called the II Institute, based in Atlanta, Georgia. So I teach online SAT prep, actually,
Nice.
in that high school. So I'm still teaching high school, just not in the more traditional sense.
Sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
so, but yeah, I've been doing that since 2005, and but that's been the majority of my career, teaching high school math. Different courses: algebra 1, algebra
Hmm.
2, geometry, stats,
Yeah.
calculus, pre-calculus.
All the above. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
all
math
the
whiz.
above.
So, and then you transition, and then so in a combination with the collegiate. So I asked that's for clarity for myself, and because I want to know, from your point of view as an educator, was there a big difference in the academic skill level of our high school students compared to the collegiate schools, or did it, obviously probably depended on the class? But kind of what was that experience like for you, kind of being in both worlds for math
Well, it
in
wasn't it
those age
wasn't
ranges?
it wasn't very different for me. A lot of the students that I encountered when I got to Cheney University, as an example, were from the Philadelphia area. Not all of them; some were from out of state. But then there are a lot of similarities between the Philadelphia school district and other school districts, and especially in urban areas. There are a lot of the same benefits and also a lot of the same problems, in urban education, all over the country. So, there were some of the same, deficiencies, that, some of the same fears of mathematics. And, my students, a lot of them plan to teach elementary school, to teach the lower grades, largely because, I mean, they kind of have more of an affinity for younger children. working with younger children. A lot of them worked in like, summer camps, and
Hmm.
they enjoyed working with like, the babies, and, the kind of first grade, second grade age,
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
And they kind of decided they might want to do that full time. But and also because they might have, not liked math or had negative experiences with math. And so
Yeah.
in a lot of the math methods courses, a lot of the time was spent not just on pedagogy and pedagogical methods, but really teaching them the content, which was unfortunate. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it had to be done, because if I don't do it, then, the methodology is not going to matter if they don't even know how to do it themselves. They don't really
Right.
know how to multiply themselves, or they didn't remember, or they don't understand, how to do calculations with percentages. Then they can't be expected to teach anybody else that,
Yeah.
so I saw a lot of similarities,
Right.
between my experience in the traditional high school classroom, and also, with a lot of the students that I encountered. Not all. Some were
Right.
some were strong. Some were strong. Some have been strong, I should say,
Hmm.
and have been really sharp. And but the ones that weren't so much, a lot of it is just, just like in the high school arena, a lot of it is just a lack of self-confidence,
Yeah.
that compounds itself year after year.
Yeah.
So, and then a lot of people kind of convince themselves that they aren't good at math, when they
Yeah.
actually are not as bad as they think they are. So that
Definitely.
happens a lot.
I think I was one of those people too. I wasn't terrible at math, but I was, I didn't care for it as much, and it took me a little while. I think, is it true that if you're good at algebra, you're not good at geometry, or vice versa? It's like one or the other. Have you ever heard
Now
that concept?
I've never heard that,
Uh
because
huh.
actually I would think, because really geometry is just algebra with shapes. Because with a lot
Hmm.
of geometry, you're just you look at a problem, and you got to figure out, okay, based upon what you're being asked to do within the problem, you
Hmm.
figure out what equation you're going to create. But then you got to know, well, what theory do I use, or which is based on, a relationship between these angles, or a relationship
Yeah.
between these legs of this triangle, or these sides of this square, or whatever.
Hmm.
And then once you create the equation, I always tell students this, like, listen, the geometry is over. Now
Yeah.
we're back, because usually in the sequence of courses,
Hmm.
most students are going to take algebra 1 ninth grade, and geometry in 10th grade. And I would
Yeah.
always tell my students, like, listen, the equations on the board now, so geometry is over now.
Hmm.
Now we flashback. Now this is a flashback to ninth grade. Now we're back in ninth grade now, and you're doing algebra 1 now, because all we got to do now is solve the equation. We just got to solve for
Yeah.
x now, because we started out, we were asked to figure out the measurement of this angle, or the measurement of the length of this side of this polygon, or whatever. And we had to say, okay, well, I know the relationship between this and this, and I know this theory says this, or whatever. And from that, then I can create an equation. And then
Yeah.
once I create the equation, now I'm just doing algebra, because I'm just going to solve the
That
equation.
makes
That's it.
sense.
You
Yeah, and
know?
I think too, like as like a more of a visual learner, like having the actual shapes or something to work with and visualize was a little bit easier. So that kind of goes back to the pedagogy, and teaching future educators on how to teach the content. Is really important, and breaking it down in the ways that you probably very eloquently do a lot better than I do. So I was also asking that in the context of obviously post COVID, there is a math and a literacy crisis, of course, in the world of education. And, you spoke a lot about even the students that you're teaching in the college express interest in working with first and second graders and things like that. And in the past couple of podcasts, we were really addressing how, those primary years of kindergarten through third grade are very essential for those learning and development milestones in both math and reading. And I just been wondering, like, based off of your experience with working with students and being in the math world, kind of your input on this data point. So I'm referring to, and I will link this in the chat for everybody that's watching. This is a study from the NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And this is per data from 2022. So as most people know, data, is a little skewed. We can see similar numbers across different platforms, but this one is from 2022. And they were mentioning in a figure that they showed that 40% of all students score below basic on 8th grade math. And this again was per 2022. And then they said 40% again of students are below 8th grade math level proficiency. So by 8th grade. So my question to you, is that number in the years that you've been teaching since 2005, almost 20 years in, is that number shocking to you to say that, 40% of all students are below, math grade by 8th grade? Like, kind of based off of what you've experienced, is that a low number? Is that a pretty average number? Is it shocking to hear that, or what are your thoughts on that number?
I would be shocked that it's not higher.
Mm,
If the deficiency is real.
yeah,
And and I think what the pandemic did is it kind of exposed something that, we already knew, and it kind of put it out on Front Street, and the media started talking about it more. But I think that there should be a sense of urgency,
right,
much more urgency. Like, but we have to consider, like, what is the goal for education for children? Because we also have to keep in mind that for every problem, there's someone that's benefiting, and there's some entity that's benefiting. So, there's something like when people are uneducated, people are undereducated, miseducated, when people don't have math skills, because when people don't have math skills, a lot of us don't understand what math really is. And we
right,
think it's just abstract equations that are irrelevant to our daily lives. But really, math is a system to teach us problem solving, a system to
mm,
teach us critical thinking ability, a system to teach us analytical reasoning, all things that we need to be successful and productive human beings, to be
right,
able to defend ourselves from being taken advantage of, to be able to teach our children and instill in them certain skills so that they can be, productive and successful human beings,
yeah,
regardless of what walk of life they enter into. So
absolutely.
um, there are many that profit greatly financially and in other ways from being able to
Hmm.
exploit, large groups of people. So
Absolutely,
a great way to be able to do that is to deny access, whether it's proactively or whether it's through some sort of, like, Richard Nixon era benign neglect. You know,
right,
um, these are the ways in which the status quo is maintained often. So when I think about, large numbers and large percentages of children that are deficient in mathematics by a certain age, then that just lets me know that, you know that the status quo is being maintained. So actually, I
uh-huh,
would say that when children learn mathematics, especially black and brown children, when they learn mathematics, that's actually a revolutionary act because it goes against the status quo. Um, and it really has the potential to really upset norms. Um,
yes,
then these children will have the ability to compete for opportunities, for resources, for land. Um, they'll be able to, recognize problems in different ways, and be equipped to solve the problems, that they have and that their communities have.
absolutely,
So those statistics don't surprise me at all. Um, but it does let us know that, this is the work that we have to do. And I think that often that in many ways we can't solely rely on schools to solve that problem,
right,
because in many instances, essentially, we don't control the schools. The schools really
right,
aren't they're, state apparatus institutions, and that aren't really controlled by us. We may influence what happens in the schools, or influence the people that may be in local city councils, or state legislatures, or local school boards that may have influence over what happens in the schools, or
yeah,
um but ultimately we control we should have control over our households and over our communities. So I think that a lot
Absolutely.
more education has to take place in our households and in our communities. And oftentimes that's like, cliche because everybody says that, oftentimes people will say, well, in response to low test scores, people will say, well, it's the parents. Parents got to do
Mhm.
this and parents got to do that. And a lot of times it's really just destructive criticism.
Yeah.
It's not really constructive criticism because the same people that are saying what the parents need to do, they're not offering resources. They're not even offering the critique in a loving way or in a
Yeah.
supportive way. It's
Right.
just more like a condemnation. It's a condemnation of parents saying, look at you, this is what you haven't done, and
Hmm.
stop blaming the teachers and whatnot. Um, but I do believe that, like, parents have to be equipped to do more so that they can do more,
Hmm.
because especially when we talk about math, children have to be prepared for math class.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, not even oftentimes, I think we've all been socialized to a certain degree to just outsource completely the mathematics education of our children. And a lot of things that are in math curricula all throughout the country can be taught in the household.
Hmm.
But this is what it will require, though. This is the challenging part. A lot of parents that have children were once upon a time children that had their own phobias and anxieties and discomfort with math themselves.
Right.
And they never got over that. And for all intents and purposes, they never needed to get over it. But now they have children that need their help and need a certain level of support that schools can't really offer. They're not equipped to
Hmm.
do that. So it's going to have to be a paradigm shift in terms of parents becoming more active,
Yeah.
in terms of educating themselves on the math that they either never learned when they were in middle school or high school, or that they were
Hmm.
just weak at, or that they forgot from middle school and high school, in a similar manner to the way a lot of parents recognize the importance of learning and developing financial literacy that they never learned when they were
Right.
children, that they feel,
Absolutely.
oh, I wish I would have learned this 30 years ago,
Yeah.
or healthy eating habits, or nutrition information that
All
they
of
never
these.
learned 30 years ago. We're
Right.
going to have to do the same thing, and people like myself are going to have to be contributing to providing those resources so that it's palatable and it's very doable, and that
Yeah.
parents don't feel like no, I can never do that. It's the school's job to do that. Well, even if you believe it's the school's job to do it, the schools can't fully
Do it all.
all on their own
Yeah.
help your children to become proficient in mathematics. They just
Right.
can't, because
Yeah.
of all of the demands, and also with school settings, there's not enough time. There's really not enough time. Like
No.
there's scope and sequence, there's standardized testing, there's we may if there's a topic that's being taught, the teacher's responsibility is to spend 4 days on this topic. And if you don't get it in those 4 days, you're just not going to get it, and we're moving on to the next thing. And the tragedy is
Yes.
that once you move on to the next topic, it's cumulative, so you need to have an understanding of the previous topic. But if you
Yes.
didn't get it, and God forbid you were sick and were absent for 1 day or 2 days,
Hmm.
and then you're definitely not going to get it. So that's why we have to figure out a way
Yeah.
to equip and empower parents to be able to prepare their children for school, and so the children have a head start. And I actually, I have a kind of a very um aggressive stance when it comes to how we orient ourselves to schools, since usually the community does not control the schools. I would like for schools to be, well, actually, I would like for us as a community to reorient ourselves in terms of how we interact and engage with schools. I would like for schools to become spaces of practice as opposed to spaces of primary learning, right? So I like for, households, community, families to be able to provide a solid foundation in mathematics, help to make sure that all children by no later than the third grade have their multiplication facts up to
Right.
12 by 12
Yes.
memorized.
Yeah.
I was on another podcast. Shout out to the Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast with Shana Terrell. People were very upset in the comments on a clip where I said that, parents should be worried if their children do not, by the third grade, do not
Mm-hmm.
have the multiplication facts memorized, right? And from studying and analyzing the comments, I realized what was making people upset. For one, somehow the word memorize has become like a curse word in
Yeah.
education circles, because I think there may be some people that feel that they want to replace actual teaching and conceptual understanding with memorization. I would never advocate for that. I think that children should learn why 9 times 5 is 45. They should learn why. They should learn the relationship between 9 times 5 and repeated addition. They should learn that. They should also learn how to do, how to manipulate certain factors to,
Yeah.
and understand the equivalent expressions that also equal 45. They should understand the relationship between, 9 times 5 and 15 times 3 or 45 times 1. They should learn all of that. But at some point,
Absolutely.
those facts should be memorized, because what happens is, and there's a couple of things about this. When the child gets to algebra 1, the child gets in algebra 2, geometry, and they're solving equations and doing more complex work, they experience academic fatigue because they're spending too much time trying to think about things like 8 times 6. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
should just know what 8 times 6 is. They have
Yeah.
so many other bigger fish to fry than eight
Yeah.
times six, but they're worried
Yeah.
about 8 times 6. That's a problem. So they should have those facts memorized. Another thing is, I think about a lot of the pushback, and I wonder if a lot of the people that are pushing back, if how much experience they have with higher level mathematics. Because if they would be against memorizing multiplication facts, I wonder if they would be against a student in a trigonometry class memorizing the coordinates of the unit circle. I wonder if they
Good.
would be against a student in the Algebra 1 class memorizing the quadratic formula. Now, granted, you could say, well, if I know how to complete the square, that method for solving quadratic equations, the quadratic formula is a derivation of the completing the square method. But even the completing the square method, the steps in that process need to be memorized, or when a student gets to calculus, would you say that they shouldn't memorize certain derivatives? They shouldn't
Right.
memorize certain integrals or indefinite integrals? So
Yeah.
I always wonder, if you're against the memorization of multiplication facts, how far do you go with this? Like, are you
Right.
just across the board? Are
Yeah.
you just anti-memorization,
Yeah.
like, for everything?
And it's
Or is it just
interesting. Yeah.
multiplication facts?
Yeah. And you make a good point. And there are, you've unloaded a lot there, and so I was taking notes. So definitely with the taboo words, right? And why is certain things so taboo in the current style of teaching and education? And it's so interesting. I was sharing with you how I was doing what we call a standards review or validation, and we take a look at like the Bloom's verbs, the Bloom's taxonomy, and like what
Hmm.
verb or what is the actual action of do you want to get out of the student when we're talking about um, retaining or performing for a certain standard, right? And so it's so interesting when we always come across memorize, and we're always like, no, don't use memorize because it's a low performing, right, standard. But
Hmm.
I think in today's now, if we actually really pay attention to our children, and this is why I very much advocate being careful with how you use technology in relation to math and reading, is they are missing out on those rote fundamental skills. Because like back in our day, we were just like 2 times 2 is 4, like going through the whole list all day long, and they don't want students to do that now. It's really strange. And like you said, if a student, because everything's like toppling on top of each other, so if your child's gone for a day or a few days or a week like mine was because he was so sick this school year, he missed a lot of information, and there's not time to backtrack, right, and just think of those chronic absenteeisms with those students that for whatever reasons they're not getting to the school, and all of those types of things. And another really good point that you also brought up too was, empowering the parents and equipping them with what they need to be resourceful and to be able to help their children with their math or any content. But here we're talking about math. And so, again, yeah, it's kind of calling out the parents like they're, and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast is because, yes, we all have shortcomings and we're all busy and we're all of these things that we all are in today's fast paced days that we have, but we still have to make it a primary top concern of like, okay, is our children performing well? And it's not even to the standards or to the test, but does your child know simple things in relation to math and reading concepts? Do they understand basic foundations in those by their age or even their grade level? And I was kind of shocked the other day, and I kind of this is one thing where I'm very transparent of is both of my children for multiple reasons are not up to grade level, which is fine, but as an educator and someone who like really tries with them, it's kind of frustrating at the same time. And but I just realized that my 8-year-old who's in 3rd grade, he didn't understand the concept of quarters and how quarters are 4 quarters is $1. He asked me for a dollar bill to take to school for something, and I was like, "Yeah, here, just take 4 quarters." He was like, "No, I have to have the dollar, the money." And I'm like, "Wait, you don't know the 4 quarters is $1? Like, what's happening here?" My mind was blown, and so immediately I'm like, "Okay, we're definitely doing like a full like crash course on dollars, and taking ownership of that at home and money and how to change and giving change and all of those things." And it was
Yeah.
like kind of like an eye opener for me too, because it's like, I think I know what they know until they really demonstrate that they don't. Yeah, so it's really fascinating on that lens.
So
So
I
kind
mean,
of,
you're being
go ahead.
educated on like what they need to be educated on, and that's
Yep.
that's good. It's good parenting that you reacted to that and that you responded to
Hmm.
that with, okay, I need to add this to my child's in-home curriculum. I
Yeah.
recognize that, like a lot of my video content from my YouTube channel that I've done with my daughter Asada is, these are things that I needed to teach her. Like some of it is like, some things that I've already taught her that she knows, and I just want to demonstrate it, for the public or for
Hmm.
anyone watching the YouTube channel, the All
Sure.
This Math YouTube channel. But some of it is like, okay, I've become aware that you don't know this thing, or you don't know how to calculate a tip at a restaurant. And
Yeah.
I feel responsible for you knowing how to calculate a tip at a restaurant. So if you don't know it,
Hmm.
that's my responsibility. So I'm going to teach it, and we're going to record it and put it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So I think that's just good parenting. And I think also what it speaks to is parents, you know, assuming more agency over their children's education and just
Right.
deciding, what do I want my child to know?
Yeah.
What do I think my child needs to know, so that they can be a successful and productive human being and an adult one day, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that we have to kind of start to think like that more.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we don't have. It's kind of just generally accepted that we're not going to have as much agency as we should, and I think we should have a lot more agency. Like we should
Should.
feel that we can make some decisions about what we want our children to know and what we think our
Hmm.
children need to know, and we can act on
Absolutely.
that. And even if we're not fully equipped to provide that, we can take our time and learn how to do it, or we can outsource, or we can partner with
Yes.
some people.
Absolutely.
If you have the resources, you can find tutoring. If you don't have those resources, because tutoring can be expensive, it can.
Yeah.
There's some free resources that can be found. Um, but I think that's also very important, just asserting agency over our
Absolutely.
children's education, as opposed to doing what we've been conditioned to do. And this is why, when I say this is not an attack on parents, because
Mm.
in fact, by us outsourcing and allowing schools to be solely responsible for the education of our children, I would say that this is how we've been taught. So we're actually following directions. We're following
100%.
instructions,
Absolutely.
because the teacher is the teacher. So we've
Yep.
grown up as students thinking,
Hmm.
okay, the teacher is the teacher. I'm supposed to learn from this person. When I
Yep.
bring homework home, even if it's 30 years ago, right, or 40 years ago, I brought homework home. It's still my teacher's homework, And, maybe my parents can help me, but you're helping me with something that my teacher gave me, that my
Right.
school gave me. So it's almost like the
Yeah.
school is primary, right? We've all
Right.
been taught that. And what I'm saying is we have to first acknowledge that and then think or realize that we have to do things differently now, because
Absolutely.
that didn't necessarily work that great for us 40 years ago. And it's
No.
definitely not working for us now.
And that's the main point, is like, why are we repeating cycles? Because, and somebody made a really good point, and another conversation I had is like, if people that don't succeed in certain districts, and or you grew up in certain areas, yet you have children, and then you send them right back into the same places that did a disservice to you, and whatever that means. And again, I am not speaking down upon public education, but as we know, there's a lot of public schools that just don't perform, or we're constantly seeing these trends of, we don't hold students back anymore. A lot of stuff is in relation to funding when it comes to education. It's very, and then, the world's kind of political in the field of education. So when we're talking in a school setting that's not homeschool, or even sometimes a small charter, can be kind of political in a sense, right? But for you to have, what is it as a parent are you good at? Are you good at budgeting and finances for your household? Are you good at grocery shopping, and you know how to, for me, I'm a frugal spender. I will go to farthest grocery store, but to pay a cheaper price versus to spend at the one right across the street from my house, And so kind of teaching the kids like those lessons, and even, around baking, like I'm a baker. So, teaching the kids math and skills and things like that, all through those concepts. Like, I think, like as parents, we sometimes can feel defensive. And I think just the general state of education, is in a defensive mode from all
Yeah.
stakeholders. The students are defensive, the teacher, the admin, the parents, everybody. So then we're not really coming to a general consensus of, yes, we all recognize this is a problem for everybody involved. So what is the resolution? And I think, again, of us all individuals taking ownership of what are these foundational problems, and where can we actually support, instead of place a blame on the other party, or just really not do our part to actually help the situation. I think is a good starting place for us. But parents that are listening, if I kind of get told I can be a little harsh sometimes, but we're sitting here scrolling on Instagram, Facebook, social media all day long. For those that do that, right, are watching
Yeah.
Akil's podcast, watching my stuff, but are we taking time to sit down with their kids and spend and dedicate that much time with them around their academics, whatever that looks like? And it can be creative. It can, you don't have to be a math genius like Akil to help them, but being there to,
Flattered. I'm
to
flattered.
yes, to be sure that they know that positive reinforcement too, because I think that goes a lot around the connotation towards education, and our mindset on education. Because like you said, if we had a poor experience, we're going to be less inclined to teach it or want to help in
Yeah.
those specific content areas for our kids. And even my own kids, they're like, yesterday, they're like, we don't want to go to school tomorrow. I'm like, oh, no. We're going to school tomorrow. Like, tomorrow's Monday, but you're going to school tomorrow. And then, kind of having those conversations. Well, why don't you want to? And kind of, hyping them back up to want to go, which is a whole other conversation. So my question to you is, how, as a parent, are you keeping your children engaged in math content, and what's the pushback sometimes you might get from them? Or
Well,
not an
so
idiot.
I would say, like, my daughter, sometimes she'd rather just be playing Roblox.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
that's
Both my
that's the
kids.
pushback, with her. So,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you that think that, just because, she's the child of a math teacher and a math professor, that she, always wants to do math all the time, she doesn't.
Yeah.
She likes to, do other things that she considers fun. I think she doesn't really consider math fun sometimes. I think she appreciates having the skill set and having the
Yeah.
fluency that she has, especially when
Yeah.
she's in an academic setting. But sometimes, like I said, she'd rather just relax, watch TV, um, play Roblox. But then when I tell her, Asada, come on, we gotta, do some work, you know,
Yeah.
she'll do it, but she puts up a little resistance at first. but
Absolutely.
she'll do it. One of the things I'm concerned with is that, um, I want her to be, I want her to have the intrinsic motivation though.
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
want her to just do things just because, um, there's a negative consequence if she doesn't, or she believes there's a negative consequence if she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, the things that I do is I try to just, keep challenging her, and have her, beyond grade level, have her, doing a lot of word problems. Yeah, that's one of the things that I
Nice.
plan to do more of is word problems, because
Yeah.
word problems are the key. It's like a catch-22. Like when a lot of people believe that math is irrelevant, the math that's taught in school is irrelevant. And it's very unfortunate, but I think part of the reason that people believe that and they think that that's a logical position to take is because they don't do word problems in their math classes. Because word problems is where you get to see firsthand the everyday application, the
Yeah.
real-time tangible application, right? And then some people will say, and I agree to this, that a lot of times the content that is provided in schools is culturally irrelevant to certain groups of people, right? Might be culturally irrelevant to Black and brown children, right? But here's the thing, and we should address that. And in the meantime, we also have to let the students know that, at least in terms of mathematics, that oftentimes, even if the content is culturally irrelevant, the framework and the method for solving the problem is transferable.
Yeah.
So what I mean by this is I always give this analogy. Like, a person goes to the store and they want to, decorate their home with pictures of their family or, maybe their friends, but maybe primarily usually their family. They buy picture
Mhm.
frames. When they buy the picture frame already has a stock photo in the frame. But when you
Yeah.
get home, you take the stock photo out and you dispose of it, right? But the frame is still there. Then you put your picture in the picture frame, and then you put your little nail in the wall and you hang the picture up.
Yeah.
So the math problem, even if it's culturally irrelevant, right? How to solve that problem, that is that is constant. That can be
Yeah.
applied in any situation. So you may
Mhm.
have to learn the skill through something through content that is irrelevant to you, that you're unfamiliar with, that you've never seen before, that you have no interest in whatsoever. But then you
Right.
take that skill set, you take that method, and then you apply it to something that you love. You apply it to something that you care about,
Right.
because
Yeah.
the skill is the skill. As long as you're
Right.
able to recognize, okay, when I see a relationship between numbers that looks like this, or this is the
Right.
relationship, or we're doing a combined work problem, you know, um,
Hmm.
or we're doing a distance rate time word problem, or we're doing
Yeah.
the coin problem where we do a system of equations, all these different types of word problems. And that's another thing about word problems. I remember learning that there are essentially about 100 different types of algebra and geometry word problems. So really, when you're preparing for the SAT or preparing for different standardized tests, as long as you learn those 100 types, and 100 seems like a lot, I know, but as long as when you start practicing them, you'll realize over time, like, wow, like I know a lot of different types of word problems. So on site, you'll
Hmm.
just recognize them.
Right.
And as you recognize them, when you see them, you're like, oh, okay, I know how to do this problem, or I know how to do that problem. I know how to do that problem. Because the method doesn't change, only the numbers change,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with, if there's a problem that's not really that relevant to you, and then you say, oh, well, I know how to do it. And then and now what happens is, in your own life, then math becomes a tool. Math becomes a
Right.
viable tool, because you can say,
Hmm.
oh, okay, I have this situation. I'm running a business, or me and my friends are trying to earn some money or save some money. We got to figure some
Hmm.
stuff out. I remember
Yeah.
in class we did this. We use this skill, we use this equation, well, these equations, so we could figure this out, even though it was something that didn't have anything to do with what we care about. But this is something we care about now. So we're going to
Hmm.
use that skill to apply it here. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I also want people to think about, is like, the importance of and the significance of math word problems, and also
Excellent.
reading comprehension, and
Yeah.
and
I was
thinking
just gonna
about
bring that in there. Yep.
how literacy is very important in mathematics. And
Excellent.
like there's this false dichotomy between being a reading person, something I push back on whenever I get the opportunity to. So I'm going to take the opportunity now. I want to push back on like the false dichotomy between being a reading person versus a math person, because you
Okay.
can't really be a math person if you don't have strong reading comprehension, because then you
Absolutely.
won't be able to understand what you're being asked to
Ask.
solve for in a math
Yep.
problem. You
Yep.
have
And
to
the
have
math
strong reading
vocabulary.
comprehension. You have to know the
Mm-hmm.
math vocabulary. You have to know how to
Vocabulary, yeah.
decode word
Mm-hmm.
problems. The same way,
Yes.
like when students are taught to go through a passage or a paragraph and
Mm-hmm.
underline key elements, who are the characters,
Mm-hmm.
what's the theme, all these different
Yep.
things. That's what we have to do in math word problems. So that we'll know,
Yes.
okay, what numbers do I need to create? And what's the relationship between these numbers? What's the relationship within this situation? And then from there, just like we talked about geometry earlier, with geometry, you're going beyond what you were doing in algebra one, oftentimes, which is just solve the equation. In
Mm-hmm.
geometry, you got to look at a picture of a shape and then look at the relationship between the parts of the shape, the angles, the sides, whatever, what have you. And you got to think about, okay, well, what theory do I know? What do I know from my theories, my list of rules about the
Yeah.
relationship between this side right here and that side right there, or this angle right here and that angle right there? From there, I say, oh, well, they're equal to each other, or they're complementary, and then you got to know what complementary means. Oh, they add up to 90, or they're supplementary. Oh,
Yeah.
what does that mean? They
It's
add up to
so much.
180. So then but
Absolutely.
then from there, I can create the equation, and once I create the
Yeah.
equation, because I can read and interpret, and then make the equation, then I can solve the equation. You know,
Yeah. And I think a
um,
lot goes to we talked about well, I refer to my son a lot too. He's autistic, and so he's very specific on what he likes, and
mhm.
where we find because he is a grade level behind, he doesn't always like the visuals that come with second grade content because he feels in his mind that he's older and should be seeing more mature, I guess, types of math skills. So what I really tried to do for him, just kind of giving some tips as a parent, is like one, encouraging their teachers as much as possible, especially for my son. He has an IEP, so he gets a lot of individualized attention. And so I have to remind them, please give him content that he's going to actually want to sit there and look at. Like, don't give him something where he's gonna, like, in a sense, feel offended, like he feels like it's very childish and babyish, even though that is the correct content for his grade level skill that he needs to work on. But you have to advocate too as a parent to make sure when you can and where you can, is the content actually even of interest to them. And I know that's a lot to say in a public school setting. But then, what are you doing at home? You can always learn from your teachers. Okay, what skills are you guys working on this week or this month? And give me some example packets of the homework sheets. And if there's not homework, my kids don't have homework at their school. So I'm like, please send me home copies of what you guys are working on so I can then reinforce it. And then if I can understand if it's something that he's not interested in, then we kind of take the same concept but tweak it into topics that he's interested in, like wrestling or basketball or things like that, and really just make it more engaging for them to actually learn. And then I found too with my daughter, trying to get her to understand the concepts of financial literacy. And I used to have to explain everything to them, and the amount of frappes they could get from
Okay.
a restaurant, because they couldn't visualize like how much something costed. So my
Yeah.
son would be like, "How much does this TV cost?" And I'm like, probably like 60 frappes from the store. And then he's like, what? And so, it kind of like really visualizes that. But now how do I get it to come to that money sense with working with numbers and, like quarters and change and all of those things. So I'll be working on that next level
Yeah.
of resources. Something else that you shared with me earlier is that you, because we talk about, the representation. So you talk about your curriculum hystematics. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and if it's available or when it's available for us to get our hands on?
So it's not a full-fledged curriculum as of yet.
Okay,
That is in the plans for the future. It definitely is
got
in the
it.
plans for the future. But
Okay.
hystematics is really something that I decided to formalize and kind of codify around 2019.
Mm-hmm.
There was a conference coming up, the Teaching Black History Conference, and at the Carter Center for, what is it, Racial History and Education. I think I'm butchering
Got
the
it.
name of it, but it is the Carter Center. And a good brother named Dr. LeGarrette King, he runs the center. He teaches out of SUNY Buffalo now. He was at the University of Missouri originally. But yeah, so it's kind of like, organically, I always would try to implement Black history into my math lessons.
Mhm.
And also different, like, cultural. I've always been culturally relevant, even before I knew the term culturally relevant. I've always tried to be culturally relevant to make the math make more sense and make it more palatable for my students. And also explain it in ways that made sense to me, while I'm, even when I was a child and I was trying to make sense of algebra and geometry and stats, I would always think
Right.
about it in a certain way, so it would make sense to me. So systematics is me being very intentional and, assertive about, using Black history to teach mathematics and simultaneously using mathematics in order to teach Black history. That's what systematics is. And I've broken it down into 5 different elements. I'll go through the elements pretty quickly. The first element is numerical triggers, which is where I create math problems that have certain results, numerical results that may be, dates of, for example, the Haitian Revolution started in 1791. So I may create an addition problem for some young children, adding 3-digit and 4-digit numbers. And I know the sum is going to be 1,791. So then that provides a nice segue into a conversation about Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Cecil Fatiman and Boukman Dutty and the nation of Haiti. And, and then, so it's educating the children about, their history,
Yes.
and also
Yes.
geopolitics and things that are going on in Haiti today, which are really directly connected to the fact that Haiti was an independent nation. And
Yeah.
France is still mad about that. And Great Britain is still mad about that. And Spain is still mad about that. The United States is still mad about that. So Haiti, receives a lot of, negativity and, neglect and vitriol from, these different nations throughout the world because of that, because of what happened.
Mhm.
So that's, an example of numerical triggers. The second element is, African centered word problems. So word problems that are very much, about history, about the history of the students, but they're mathematical word problems. Like I may have a
Mhm.
word problem dealing with the Black Panther Party, talking about how they had copies of, and this is basically based on the history of, what some of the things the Black Panther Party did. They had copies of the Red Book from Mao Zedong, and they were selling them on the campus at I believe UC Berkeley. I believe UC Berkeley, or maybe it was Stanford, one of those institutions out there in Northern California. Um, and they bought them for a certain price, and then they sold them for a certain price. And the question might
Mhm.
be, well, what is the how much profit was generated? Something like that. Something that gives them an opportunity to practice the math skills, but at the same time, they're learning the content. They're learning the history at the same time in a very organic way.
Right.
Um, then the third element is what I call double entendres, or conceptual, experiential learning models, where we discuss how, there are certain concepts in mathematics that mirror kind of social relationships and social dynamics. You know,
Right.
um, Case in point, I think about radical equations. When you solve a radical equation, which you might see in an algebra 2 class, or a pre-calculus class, in radical equations, you there's essentially 2 steps. You want to isolate the radical expression, and then you want to eliminate the radical sign. So as I'm studying that and I'm thinking more about it, I start thinking about people like Asada Shakur. I start thinking about people like Mumia Abu Jamal in Philadelphia. And I start thinking about how, the state apparatus, the goal in order to help maintain the status quo is to first isolate the radicals, right? From the masses, isolate them away from the masses of people, and then
Mhm.
eliminate them, whether you just murder them through state sanctioned violence, or you incarcerate them as political prisoners for 50 years or for the rest of their life or whatever, indefinitely, right? Like Nelson Mandela, like, put him in jail for like, Robben Island somewhere, right? Something like that, right? It's the same concept. And also it provides a way to explain history while you're teaching mathematics, and
Nice.
also to help the students to be able to better remember, the steps in the process. Because when they're on that test and they're like, man, like I forgot how to do this problem. How do you do this problem? Oh, yeah. I remember what happened to Asada Shakur. They tried to isolate her, and then they tried to eliminate her. They incarcerated her. Okay, yeah, so cool. That's what I got to
That
do
makes
to,
sense.
solve this equation. And there's so many examples like that. Like
Yeah.
mathematics is
Okay.
generally is rich and
Right.
replete with examples
Right.
like that. Where we
Right.
have these parallels. The fourth element and the fifth element. Well, the fourth element is statistics of the Black experience, right?
Okay.
All the statistics, and that's a way to make statistics come to life and become more, more tangible for us and be seen as a useful tool. And last but
Mhm.
not least, the fifth element is um, Black mathematical exemplars, whether they be people that were formally trained as mathematicians, such as Dr. David Blackwell, Etta Zuber Falconer was a woman that trained many mathematicians and taught at Spelman College for many years.
Mhm.
There's so many. Some of the names escape me right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then also the people that were not formally trained as mathematicians, but used mathematics. That were part of the Black community that use mathematics on a regular basis. Like I think of W.E.B. Du Bois. I see him as a mathematician, even though he's
Mhm.
not identified that way in a lot of historical books. But with his sociological research and a lot of the books that he
Yeah.
wrote, like the Philadelphia Negro, which was a study of the community of
Mhm.
South Philadelphia in 1896. He was doing
Mhm.
he was using mathematics and using statistics and statistical analysis
Mhm.
to paint a picture of the conditions in Philadelphia in the Black community. So
Yeah.
and that fifth element is very important because I know like Black children don't see Black mathematicians. So this is part of the problem. This is part of like why many of us don't grow up thinking, oh, I'm gonna become a mathematician or I'm gonna become a math teacher.
Right.
Because we don't know
Right.
that Black people do that. We
Right.
might have had a Black math teacher, a Black man or woman that might have been a math teacher if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But
Right.
besides that, it's like, nah, we don't really do math. Like that doesn't really happen. So we gotta really like see unearth these people and
Mhm.
make them popular and remove them from obscurity, relative obscurity, I should say, not obscurity, but relative obscurity. We got to remove them from relative obscurity so that young people can see them and then they can say, oh, okay, they become household names just as athletes and other types of
Yeah.
entertainers, rappers,
Absolutely.
singers, just as they are. We got to be able to do that. So that's in a nutshell. That's hystematics in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. I'm definitely looking forward to that whenever that comes out. And I'll talk to you more about that in a little bit. But my final little wrap up here, we're already an hour in, which is awesome. You share so much great knowledge and resources, and even in that little clip, I was like, "Yep, that's going to be a great resource to have." So also just wanted to touch on your tutoring side. So of course you're a tutor and outside of the classroom, and just kind of for that experience with you and with tutoring, do you take it in a different approach than you would in the traditional classroom, or more like individualized for the student? Do you do like big groups, small groups? Just share what you do in that context, and if people can connect with you for tutoring services.
Yeah, they definitely can. They definitely can connect with us on the website at www.allthismath.com. There's a contact form. Just fill that out and just reach out to us. All of our tutoring at this time is virtual. We're based in Philadelphia, and actually, my son is also a tutor, but he's based in Baltimore. He
Nice.
attends Morgan State, so
Nice.
he's been working with the company since he was a freshman in high school. So he's been tutoring,
Nice.
for about 5 years now. So most of our tutoring is individual based, one-on-one, but we have done small group. We have done some small group tutoring. We have done that,
Nice.
and and we'll continue to, and we will be expanding. Actually, hiring a team of tutors so that we can service more people, more young people,
Nice.
and even adults. Adult learners. Whoever wants tutoring, whoever wants math support. Um, we want to be able to provide that. And it's different. Of course, tutoring is different from teaching because with tutoring, instead of teaching a class for 60 minutes with 25 people in it and kind of just trying to address as many different learning styles as possible, um, trying to find the middle ground, I guess. With tutoring, if you're dealing with one person, then it's all about them. So I'm dealing with it's all about you, your learning style, how you learn best. We're having conversation. I'm catering to your needs specifically. And
Nice.
and I say to any parents out there, if you can afford it, get your children a tutor. Get your children tutoring, even if it's not me or my company. Get them some tutoring. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
difference maker. That is the difference maker. You want to
absolutely.
have a head start. A lot of the children that are in class with your children that are doing very well, they're not doing very well because they were just born that much smarter than your children. Oftentimes, they're
Right.
doing better because they have tutors. They have
Yeah.
tutoring. It's a cheat code. And, they may not be saying anything. But I do want to talk more about that because this has long-term consequences. There are a
Yes.
lot of adults walking around, I'm convinced that we're in high school, we're in middle school, we're in elementary school. And when the teacher taught a new subject, a new topic, there was somebody in their class that immediately understood it. And a lot of the adults that are walking around were the other student in the class that when the teacher introduced that topic at the same time, they were completely lost. They were dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on, right? They looked at that student that got it immediately and they said, see, they got it immediately. I didn't. Therefore, something wrong with me. Maybe I'm dumb
Mhm.
or math just isn't my thing. I'm not, so I shouldn't even, why bother? Why even try?
Yeah.
Your child, that adult, the adult today, when they were a child, they assumed, which many of us do, that classroom was a level playing field.
And then,
Oftentimes, that classroom was not a level playing field. That child might have had a tutor. If that
right.
child had a tutor, they already knew the topic. They already had been taught it. This was a review for them.
Yeah.
For the other students, they were seeing it for the first time. But this was a
Yeah.
review for that student because they had tutoring. Or you
Yep.
might have a student that has a father like me. I'm a math teacher, a math professor. My oldest son, my daughter Asada, they were doing algebra, solving simple equations at age 6, at age 5 and 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you sit in a class, if you did not have that experience, which most people don't, right?
Hmm.
If you sit in class with one of my children and use them as the benchmark, you're gonna feel bad. You can't
Yeah.
use them as the benchmark, right?
Yeah.
It's just gonna discourage you because you don't know the whole story. Now, because my
Right.
son's not bragging about the fact that he's telling everybody, yeah, my dad's a math teacher. I was doing algebra since I was 6. He's very humble, a very humble guy. He's
Yeah.
not telling nobody that.
Yeah.
But you sit in class with him, you think, oh, we're in the same grade, and he knows it already. As soon as the teacher puts the
Yeah.
problem on the board, he knows how to do it. Then a lot of
Yeah.
adults walking around that think they're bad at math because they had
Hmm.
experiences like that. They thought the classroom was a level playing field, but it's not. So
Yeah.
it's like I always ask these questions of people. So I often ask these questions. When you say you're bad at math, what are the metrics that you're using to determine that? If you believe that
Right.
to be true.
Right.
Once you start having that conversation, a lot of things get exposed. And you're like, wait, no, you're really not that bad at math. There were some, preconceived notions that you may have had, some ideas that
Hmm.
you bought into that you shouldn't have based on assumptions that were made that may have
Yeah.
been invalid when you were a child. And that just
Yep.
compounded every day, every month, every school year, every grade. And now here you are, you're a 30-year-old man or woman, 40-year-old man or woman, 50-year-old man or woman,
Yeah.
and you've lived with that and just accepted it. And it's just been reinforced throughout the
Yeah.
duration of your life. And now here
Yeah.
we are, and you're walking around thinking that you're bad at math, all because of something foundational that happened that actually wasn't even true. So I just
Yeah.
want anybody listening to that to think about that. And so when they
And
have children in school, don't
yeah.
let your children think that classroom is a level playing field because it probably isn't. Somebody's got to, especially
And,
at these private schools. At these private
oh
schools,
yeah. Yeah.
especially at the private schools. The parents know, like, okay, yeah, I'm paying money for you to go to private school. I'm paying your tuition or whatever. I'm also going to pay for you
Hmm.
to get a tutor. They go hand in hand. It's like we're definitely getting
Yeah.
tutoring. Twice a week, you're seeing a math tutor. Twice a week, you're seeing
Yep.
a reading tutor. Like, that's just the norm for a lot of people. So if you try to
Absolutely.
compare yourself to them, thinking that, oh, this is this is just pure pure raw
Luck.
intellectual
Yeah.
capability, it's not.
Yeah.
They've already
Yeah.
learned what they're saying in
Yeah.
class.
And there's so much that go. Maybe you're gonna have to get on another episode, but there's so much to that because it's there's a lot of things at play, right? Of course, we have the socioeconomic piece of it, right? Not being able to afford. We have the time piece of it. We have I think also it's a very big disparity within the mindset around education between cultures. So you'll see, certain cultures like the Asian culture being very high fluent, having high fluency in both reading and mathematics, but kind of if you actually research and study their approaches into it, into those contents, and as well as how rigorous of exercises. And again, like you said, you're practicing, you're not just learning to retain information, but you're actually practicing these skills. And so that rote skills, repetition, doing things repeatedly, exposing your children to different concepts, math concepts or problems, times table, even reading, right? It's so important. So we have to really have, I think it's a shift in mindset around how we educate our kids, and not have, that negative connotation to it. Because yeah, we might not have had the best experience, but even us as adults know that without certain key knowledge that we didn't have when we were younger, and we may have obtained when we're now as an adult, we want our kids to be more readily prepared for the real world. And that's kind of where as a parent, I'm like, okay, you guys want to act like X, Y, and Z, like we'll still keep you. You're still a child, but no, you're going to learn. And so like, we're going to really go in hard. And so I love when you're saying, get a tutor, because I'm definitely at the point where this year I'm like, yep, we're doing tutoring all summer long. To gain some, catch up a little bit, so they can be better prepared for their next school year.
It'll make a huge difference. It'll definitely pay dividends. And even if even if you don't necessarily see it right away, like long term, it's long term, because math is so cumulative.
Right.
There's a compounded effect.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so where can I'm going to wrap this up, and then again, guys, I will be sure to tag everything in the chat below, but where can the followers get in contact with you guys? Again, your website, and then what social media pages do you have?
So the website is allthismath.com. If you're interested in tutoring inquiries, please reach out to us on allthismath.com. There's a brief contact form. Just fill that out with a little bit of information, and we will be in touch with you. Also on all the socials, it's All This Math. All This Math on Instagram, All This Math on TikTok, All This Math on Facebook. The YouTube channel, please go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, but use the YouTube channel. Don't just subscribe. Actually use it and tell everybody about it. I want it to be a household name. We currently have almost 700 videos on the channel, ranging from arithmetic all the way up to Calculus 1 and everything in between. So definitely go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, use it. You'll get I use the hystematics framework, so you're going to get a little bit of Black history in the beginning of almost every video, not every video, but almost every video. I promote historically Black colleges on the channel, so similar to how, when I grew up, I used to watch A Different World after the Cosby Show went off. And, so I was always very much, acclimated to HBCUs. That's why I ended up attending HBCUs, and I teach at a HBCU. So, you'll get that from the channel, and, you'll get simplified mathematics instruction. And also my goal and my aim is to make people feel like they can do it, right? Oftentimes, and this is something that is not often discussed, sometimes when people are so teachers, professors, whomever, instructors, they're so proficient in a subject, the way they explain it actually can discourage a student, right? So we have to be careful in terms of like how we explain things, because the way we come off and the way we communicate can actually make a student feel like, you know what, the way he or she is talking about this, they sound uber smart, and I don't feel like I'm as smart as them. So I think that the requirement is for me to be as smart as them in order to get this, based upon the way that they sound when they're explaining this. So I pride myself on providing very simplified explanations, and that leave people feeling like, wow, this really isn't that hard. I like the way he broke that down step by step,
Mhm.
you know, and show and use some metaphors and some analogies and whatever, some ad libs in the videos. And I feel like I can do this, right? I was able to
Nice.
follow along, so that's one of the things I pride myself on. That's my classroom teaching style. So my classroom teaching
Nice.
style, just like my tutoring style, it's also available on the YouTube channel. So please go to the All This Math YouTube channel, subscribe, share, watch some videos, leave some comments.
Yes.
Even if I make a mistake on one of the videos, it happens. I make mistakes on the videos sometimes.
Yeah.
Please let me know,
We're
because
human.
I might have missed it.
Absolutely.
If you see a video with my
Okay,
daughter
great.
Asada in the video, sometimes she doesn't really like to stand still. Sometimes you'll see her dancing around, like, while I'm at the board, if I'm not asking her a question about the problem at that particular
Mhm.
moment. If that's
Yeah.
enjoyable for you, leave a comment, and
Yeah.
share. Put the videos
Definitely.
in
The
your
comments, like,
in your group chats. Share the links in your group chats with all your
Yes.
friends and family. So yeah, so reach out to
All of
us.
the above.
All this math on the socials, all this math on YouTube, allthismath.com is our website, and also check out our book. It's available on Amazon. How to Use All This Math, Volume
Nice.
1, a guidebook for parents to
Awesome.
prepare children for math class, which will prevent them, hopefully, from ever developing math anxiety or math phobia. That's what you want. Because once that
Nice.
anxiety and that
Beautiful.
phobia sets in, it's very difficult to rid themselves of it for anybody. It's very
Yes,
difficult.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you
Thank
want
you
them to
so
have a
much.
head start.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so I'll definitely, again, be sure to tag all of this stuff in the chat for us. Thank you again, Akil, and everybody. Like he said, like, follow, and share. Myself, Kylie Elizabeth, the Virtuoso Educator, and Akil Parker on at All This Math. And you guys all have a great night. Thank you so much, Akil.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.